God will work with you, but not for you. By Lao Russell. Chapter 4 continued. Why am I here? Pagan barbarian man. The second stage of man's unfolding is the pagan or barbarian age, which we are now in. It began when the first faint suspicion of a higher power than man entered his consciousness. He then began to think, to reason, to discover flame, the boat, the sail for the boat, and the wheel. The idea of morality dawned in his unfolding awareness. He divided right from wrong. There was good and evil. He began to command matter by knowing about matter. He commanded the earth to yield harvests for him, and made implements to multiply his command. Woman worked with him in the ground. She raised his sheep, his goats, his cattle. She made tents and raiment. Woman began to be important in man's esteem, instead of only in his life. The forever search for the great unknown led to sun worship, demon worship, idol worship. Man then made gods of wood, of stone, man-gods, always man-gods, made in man's image for man. Long centuries passed, then the one God was envisioned by man. He still remained the male God, made in the image of man for man. Man made him to be like man, to be pleased with the shedding of blood, to be wrathful, vengeful, and quick to anger. Men worshipped their male god of wrath at altars drenched with blood. Tens of thousands of sheep, goats, and bullocks were slain to appease God in hope of remission of sins. Neophytes were drenched with overflowing fountains of blood at their baptismal ceremonials. Heroic pagan legends told of the pleasure given to their one god of wrath by some hero who slew 1,000 men with the jawbone of an ass, and similar heroic stories conceived by barbarians who still remembered their primate days and still loved bloodshed, slaughter, and conquest of man by man. Great civilizations grew and fell again and again, each time to rise a little higher and again fall. Relics and monuments remained above the earth to tell of these civilizations. Pyramids and temples and tombs in Egypt, in the high Andes, in Yucatan, in Tibet and India. Evil became a reality as man thought evil and practiced it. Evil became legendary. Magic, the supernatural, the unnatural, and the miraculous formed the basis of thousands of pagan legends about evil and the reality of evil. The most damaging of these pagan legends to human progress is that monstrous legend which would have you believe that a serpent could have intelligent conversation with a woman, that a serpent had knowledge of good and evil, that good and evil grew on a tree, and that evil came into the world because a man ate an apple. The viciousness of the legend lies in the assumption that the evil and sin of the world is God's holy law of mating, which unites fathers and mothers of creation into one, so that they can again create more fathers and mothers to continue God's plan. It made our God of love to be the creator of evil. This legend of evil created evil itself by being one of the causes of plunging all that is good in man into 12 centuries of bestial sex degradation. It bred cruelties and tortures of 2 inquisitions. Countless thousands of people still believe this early pagan legend, which typifies the stage of gross ignorance of the world of that day. It demonstrates how difficult it is for man to escape from his own primacy. These legends have become tradition to man, which means that he believes things unthinkingly because he has always believed them, so he no longer subjects them to logical reasoning. Such beliefs hold mankind back by retarding the unfolding of his higher spiritual nature. Just so long as man prefers to be pagan by insisting upon pagan beliefs and practices, he will still be pagan. Man is always what he thinks. He cannot become spiritually exalted by being physically depraved or by thinking depravity. Pagan memories are still interwoven into our enlightenment of today as tradition, and tradition is strong because it is repeated unthinkingly. We even unthinkingly sing pagan traditional hymns. We sing, "There is a fountain filled with blood, drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stains." That hymn would have been appropriate for a pagan baptismal festival where dozens of live animals were slaughtered to appease the bestial god of their own bestial conceiving, but not for gatherings of gentle people who would shudder with terror at such a scene. It takes many centuries of higher civilizations to eliminate the traditional beliefs of our early pagan days in which devils, demons, evil spirits, and other superstitions of that day's gross ignorance are still carried into this day. As long as our beliefs are pagan, our civilization will be pagan. God sent mind-illumined messengers to hasten the unfoldment of man's spiritual nature. The Buddha, Zoroaster, Moses, Confucius, Lao Tzu, and Jesus to tell of the one God of love, but tradition was stronger than truth. The male god of wrath and fear persisted in their day and still persists in ours. For instance, we still continue to say we are a nation of God-fearing men, whereas we should say we are a nation of God-loving men. The roots of dead beliefs are hard to uproot, but man must suffer until they are rooted out of him. He must suffer by living in the world of his own making, and the kind of world he makes is the kind of man he is. Man thinking created the warring world of fear, hatred, enmity, and disunity we are forced to live in today. Man made it in his own likeness, in his own male thinking image. Genghis Khan made the world of his day in his own image. Then came Alexander, Caesar, Charlemagne, Frederick and Peter the Great, Ivan the Terrible, William the Conqueror, Napoleon, Bismarck, Hitler, Lenin, Stalin, Mussolini, and other male conquerors, tyrants, dictators, marauding bands of Huns, Tartars, Manchus, Norsemen, and other terrorists who have made the world over repeatedly in their male images. Woman slowly rose in man's esteem in parts of the world. Wherever woman made her influence felt as the spiritual mate of her physical man, nations responded to that influence and progressed with great rapidity. Wherever woman was suppressed, however, that nation retrogressed. It could not keep up with the world flow. The measure in which any country has progressed is the measure of its recognition of woman. Man still thinks of himself as master in his own house. He still thinks of his own mental superiority as ruler of world government and world business. He still thinks of a woman as a cook and homemaker. When women organized to fight for equal suffrage rights, men thought of it as an utter absurdity. But when man's wars made it imperative for woman to share in manufacture and industry, she excelled men in many capacities, even though it was all new thinking for her. Man's seemingly total ignorance of God's plan concerning the man-woman-mate relationship has made him unaware that he created man and woman as equal halves of one, for unity is impossible between two unequal halves. Man, the marauder, the fighter, the conqueror, has had millions of years to remember his life-destroying days of killing to take happiness away from others. Woman, the mother, the giver of life, has had millions of years to remember the service she has given to man. The spiritual love nature of woman has never had a chance of balancing the progress of civilization, and for that reason civilizations have repeatedly fallen, as our present civilization must inevitably fall because of its own unbalance and disunity in all of the essentials necessary for a normal existence. For thousands of years the pagan barbarian civilization remained at a very low, unchanging level. About 800 years ago, a greater spiritual awakening advanced man to an ever-increasing level. Steadily gathering momentum, it progressed the human race farther intellectually in the last 100 years than in previous thousands of years. During the last 800 years, painting and music and literature, the greatest of the spiritually transforming arts, came into being. Sculpture and architecture had been here before. These are the static arts, which did not reach to the soul of early man. The rhythms of music and painting express the meter of man's heartbeat and the universal heartbeat. They have the power to reach the soul through their dynamism, which sculpture and architecture lacked. The diatonic scale in music was unknown to man until 100 years after Leonardo lived. Caesar never knew the divine music which is ours to know. The human consciousness had not unfolded in that day to the stage where it would have meaning. A Bach, Beethoven, or Wagner rendition would have been but boring noise to a Caesar or Nero, just as it still is to a prize fighter or any lover of blood-shedding sports today. An age of paganism which gloried in gladiatorial fights, one in which the greatest pleasure of women and children was in witnessing lions rend humans, or bloodshed of man by man in the arenas of that day, could not possibly have understood our tonal music had they had it. Music, however, was the greatest cause of bringing love into the human race. As the music, painting, and sculpture of the great masters came into the world, cruelty and bloodlust went out of it. The rhythmic beat of all great music, and the tonal harmonies of all great art, interprets the universal heartbeat. It reaches man's soul by inducing inner thinking to replace outer sensing. Inner thinking is meditative, and gives birth to desire for prayer, and prayer is an innate and intuitive desire to talk to God. The growth of music awakened the spiritual in man and inspired in him the urge to find God. Music and worship are synonymous, each is the other. The Christian spirit rose from its ashes and uplifted man one step higher upon his long climb. It was but a little step higher, but it transformed the human race. The power of the newly awakened Christian spirit in the first spiritual rebirth of this barbarian age brought world culture and its consequent higher stage of human friendliness up to the standard which gave us the 8 great centuries of progress which we are now about to lose. It did not bring knowledge, however. Man's concepts are still pagan. His concept of God is still a great powerful man with a physical body and a great capacity to wrath. Human understanding is not yet unfolded to the point where it can comprehend power and love in an invisible God, even though the greatest power known to man is gravity, and gravity is invisible. Nor can the pagan mind comprehend heaven being anywhere but above the earth among the clouds, where good people are sent to when they die. Pagan concepts inherited from pagan legends and superstitions prevent Christian practice from advancing at the same pace as Christian spirit, as indicated by the steady rise of world culture. Christian spirit without Christian practice will never make a Christian world. The ultimate of a Christian world is the unity and peace which comes from knowledge of God's ways and practices. It means one world unity in brotherly love and obedience to God's one law of rhythmic, balanced interchange in all man's transactions with man, as nature observes that law in her transactions. Spiritual culture rose steadily for centuries, but barbaric greed and primate memories of blood and conquest in the masses were not eliminated sufficiently to balance the spiritual growth which was transforming the few. Spiritual growth, however, was sufficiently strong in man to give birth to an electric age which completely transformed world thinking and living conditions. Our past 100 years of progress have been greater than all of the centuries preceding it since the days of the Renaissance.